In this video, we'll be going over IRS Form 4361, Application for Exemption from Self-Employment Tax for use by ministers, members of religious orders, and Christian Science practitioners. The purpose of this form is to apply for an exemption from self-employment tax if you have ministerial earnings and are one of the following: an ordained, commissioned, or licensed minister of a church, a member of a religious order who has not taken a vow of poverty, or a Christian Science practitioner. This application must be based on your religious or conscientious opposition to the acceptance of any public insurance that makes payments for death, disability, old age, or retirement, or that makes payments for the cost of or provides services for medical care, to include any insurance benefits established by the Social Security Act. In general, ministerial service is considered the service that you perform in the exercise of your ministry, in the exercise of the duties required by your religious order, or in the exercise of your profession as a Christian Science practitioner. Ministerial earnings are the self-employment earnings that result from such service. You should not file Form 4361 if either of the following apply. 1. You have ever filed Form 2031, Revocation of Exemption from Self-Employment Tax for use by ministers, members of religious orders, and Christian Science practitioners. Or 2. You belong to a religious order and you took a vow of poverty. You are automatically exempt from self-employment tax on earnings for services you perform for your church or its agencies. No tax exemption applies to earnings for services you perform for any other organization. You should file this tax return by the due date to include extensions. You should file Form 4361 by the due date, including extensions of your tax return for the second tax year in which you had at least $400 of net earnings from self-employment, any of which came from ministerial services. An exemption from self-employment tax is effective for all tax years ending after 1967 in which you have net self-employment earnings of $400 or more if you receive any of it from ministerial services. Before your application can be approved, the IRS must verify that you are aware of the grounds for exemption and that you want the exemption on that basis. When your completed Form 4361 is received, the IRS will mail you a statement that describes the grounds for receiving an exemption under Internal Revenue Code 1402E. You must certify that you have read the statement and that you seek exemption on the grounds listed on the statement. The certification must be made by signing a copy of the statement under penalties of perjury and mailing it to the IRS not later than 90 days after the date of the statement was mailed to you. If it is not mailed at that time, your exemption will not be effective until the date a signed copy is received by the IRS. If your application is approved, a copy of Form 4361 will be returned to you marked Approve. You should keep this copy for your permanent records. Once this exemption is approved, you cannot revoke it. Let's move on to the form itself. At the top of the form, you'll see line 1 is the name of the taxpayer applying for the exemption as shown on your Form 1040, as well as your Social Security number, number and street address, city, state, and zip code, and a phone number that is optional. You should file the original and 2 copies and then attach supporting documents. This is from the top of the form. So in line 2, you'll check one box only. Christian Science practitioner, ordained minister, priest, or rabbi, member of religious order not under a vow of poverty, or a commissioned or licensed minister. in which case you would need to see line 6. We'll get to that momentarily. In line 3, you'll enter the date that you were ordained, licensed, or commissioned as a minister of the church, began a member of the religious order, or began practice as a Christian Science practitioner. Do not file your form before the date you list in line 3. You should also attach a copy of the certificate, or if you did not receive a certificate, a letter from the governing body of your church that establishes your status as an ordained, commissioned, or licensed minister, a member of a religious order, or a Christian Science practitioner. In line 4, you will enter the legal name of your ordaining, licensing, or commissioning body or religious order, as well as the street address, city, state, and zip code, and employer identification number. You should be able to obtain your EIN, employer identification number, from your church or order. In line 5, you'll enter the first 2 years after the date on line 3 in which you had net self-employment earnings of $400 or more, any of which came from your services as a minister, priest, rabbi, etc. So, for example, if this date was March of 2021, you would enter 2022, 2023 here. In line 6, if you apply for the exemption as a licensed or commissioned minister and your denomination also ordains ministers, please indicate how your ecclesiastical powers differ from those of an ordained minister of your denomination. You will need to attach a copy of your denomination's bylaws relating to the powers of ordained, commissioned, and licensed ministers. And finally, line 7 simply is the verbiage that you will sign underneath to certify that you are conscientiously opposed to, or your religious principles force you to become opposed to, the acceptance of public insurance that makes payments in the event of death, disability, old age, retirement, or pays for provide services for medical care. And you'll also certify that you have informed your ordaining, commissioning, or licensing body that you have this objection. You also certify that you've never filed Form 2031 to revoke a previous exemption from Social Security. And finally, you are requesting to be exempted from paying self-employment tax under Section 1402E of the Internal Revenue Code, and that you understand that the exemption, if granted, only applies from these earnings. And you're declaring everything under penalties of perjury. If that is the case, then you'll simply sign and date in the signature block, and you should receive a copy of this form that you filed, and if it's approved, you will see that it is approved by the Internal Revenue Service along with a signature and a date. That's all we have for this review of IRS Form 4361, Application for Exemption from Self-Employment Tax for Use by Ministers, Members of Religious Orders, and Christian Science Practitioners. If you'd like, we've written a full-length article on this. Simply go to our website, teachmepersonalfinance.com, type in IRS Form 4361 in the search bar, and you should see this article appear. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please post them in the comments. If you like our YouTube channel, please subscribe to it. If you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you very much. Have a great day.